We've got major shakeups at the wide receiver position in this particular week, and we've got more bye weeks, of course, heading into week 6. So we need to make some tough fantasy football decisions this week. So we're going through the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 6 fantasy football, guys. And as always, at the end of each ranking video, I give you guys my favorite underdog flex option at the week at each position. So you will see my favorite underdog wide receiver flex position of this particular week. I am filming this at 1 a.m. on Monday night, guys, and I just crossed 5,000 subscribers just last week. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and just dive right into these rankings right now. So obviously you got your first tier, guys, and we've got a guy who's belonging back in here, and we'll get to him in a second. But first we got to talk about Tyreek Hill. I mean, it really doesn't matter, but he's playing the Carolina Panthers. So it's like, how can you not have Tyreek Hill at number 1 at any week, but especially in a week like this against Carolina? I mean, if you want to talk about game script, it doesn't matter. They absolutely obliterated the New York Giants last week, and Tyreek Hill was still excellent in fantasy football. 23 points per game, basically, averaging over 130 yards per game, 5 touchdowns through 5 weeks. It's unstoppable when we're talking about Tyreek Hill. There's no way he's not going to be at number 1 for the foreseeable future, especially without Justin Jefferson this week. And Jamar Chase is number 2. Jamar Chase is back exactly where he belongs. Now, of course, when you're talking about Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, it's hard to put Jamar Chase above those guys. But obviously, Jamar Chase now without Justin Jefferson, I mean, he belongs here. He's taking on the Seattle Seahawks this week in Cincinnati this week. And I just think that Jamar Chase, when you look at what he did last week, that's what he's capable of doing every single week. That's not a surprise to us at all. He's averaging now 17.6 fantasy points. He scored all 3 of those touchdowns this past week, and he's averaging 12 targets a game. And that's the metric that's important here. The volume is absolutely there. And honestly, I'm calling my shot on Cincinnati regaining what they were and Jamar Chase regaining what he was. So number 3, we've got Stefon Diggs taking on the New York Giants on Sunday night in Buffalo. It's going to be a bloodbath. It will be an absolute bloodbath. It's going to be gross. But from a fantasy football perspective, Stefon Diggs is going to be great. I mean, he's going to absolutely go off this week. There's no question. He's been excellent in fantasy so far, averaging 10 targets a game, over 100 yards per game, and 19.9 fantasy points per game. Stefon Diggs has been outstanding, and he's going to continue to do that exactly. Now we're moving down to our next tier right here. And honestly, our next tier right here, it's hard to rank these guys outside of the top 3, but I mean, the wide receivers are so stacked right now, especially this week. But we've got Cooper Kupp right now taking on the Arizona Cardinals this week. So Cooper Kupp, in his first game back, was excellent. 12 targets, 118 reception yards, and 15.8 fantasy points at half PPR. He was excellent in that week 5 loss. Like, Cooper Kupp, back to who exactly we remember him as. I've got no concerns about Cooper Kupp. And especially after what Arizona just gave up to Jamar Chase, I've got no problems here with the Los Angeles Rams at home having Cooper Kupp at number 4. And at number 5, I've got Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the New England Patriots in Las Vegas this week. So really, it's a very simple thing, which is that Davante Adams, there's multiple layers to this. Davante Adams is great. Obviously, there's no question. What he did on Monday night was disappointing for sure. But when you look at the rest of the season, I mean, 12.5 targets per game, dominating in target share, 18.6 fantasy points per game. And also, something that I've said over the years of this channel is that one of the things that Bill Belichick consistently does, and does well, is takes away your number 1 option. And honestly, I do believe they believe that Davante Adams is the number 1 option. I actually don't think it matters anymore. I think New England is awful. They're terrible. I mean, Christian Gonzalez is hurt, their star rookie corner. What else are they gonna do? I don't see them taking away Davante Adams. I'm not worried about Davante Adams this week, like I was with other guys earlier in the season. New England is terrible. At number 6, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the New York Jets in New York this week. This one worries me a little bit because the Jets defense has been playing well, especially Sauce Gardner, and A.J. Brown is in an offense that is very similar to San Francisco's. They've got so many weapons on this offense that not all of them can eat every single week. And A.J. Brown has ate the past several weeks. Could this be a Devonta Smith game? Absolutely, it could be. I don't know exactly if it's going to be, but with Sauce Gardner probably going to be on A.J. Brown a good portion of the time, I wouldn't be surprised if A.J. Brown has a down game, but I'm not ranking him outside my top 10. I mean, look at the numbers. 10.2 targets per game, 16.7 fantasy points per game. He's been just excellent. He's absolutely been excellent. So I got no problems with A.J. Brown. I do have a little bit of concern this week, but he's just too elite to have outside of the top 10. Number 7, Puka Nacua, taking on the Arizona Cardinals at home. I talked about it last week. With Puka Nacua, the problem that a lot of people I saw were having last week was, what should I do with him? Should I start him? What if I have Cooper Kupp? Should I start both of them? And I said yes and yes. And the reason I said that is because, listen, Cooper Kupp is great. Cooper Kupp is a top-tier wide receiver in this league, but Puka Nacua has established himself in this offense. He's not going away. It's not all of a sudden just going to be a situation where they're like, well, Cooper Kupp is back. Thank you for your services, Puka Nacua. You're all done here. It's like, no, this guy is great. He works great with Matt Stafford. The team loves him. The dude's intangibles are great. Route running, hands. I mean, everything is just very, very good for Puka Nacua. So I've got no issues ranking Puka Nacua here at number 7. I think, honestly, I said it on my live stream Monday night. I said, listen, this is a guy who is going to be consistently a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy. I'm very comfortable having him here. At number 8, I've got Keenan Allen, man. Coming off the bye week, taking on the Dallas Cowboys. So obviously, the Dallas Cowboys matchup is the problem here. Now, if you look at what Dallas Cowboys just gave up against San Francisco, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it shouldn't be that scary. And honestly, it's not that I don't think Keenan Allen's going to be great. Keenan Allen's going to be great this week. I mean, with Mike Williams down, he's just absolutely so far and away this Los Angeles Chargers number 1 wide receiver, and he already was. I mean, he was already the number 1. But look at what he's doing right now. 21.4 fantasy points per game, 11 targets per game, and over 100 reception yards per game. I don't know what else you need. I mean, Keenan Allen has been so excellent in fantasy football, and he's going up against a team that is coming off a bad loss for sure. But they're also going on the road across the country to the Los Angeles Chargers, who are starting to click offensively right now as well. Now they've got a full week off. They're coming in well rested and healthy. I think that Keenan Allen has a great game. Number 9, probably going to feel high for some people, but I've got Nico Collins of the Houston Texans this week, and the Houston Texans are taking on the New Orleans Saints. So let me tell you why I have Nico Collins on this high. So obviously, Nico Collins has another down week this past week, and a lot of people are like back to where they originally were feeling before the Steelers game where he torched them. There's a balance to be had with Nico Collins here. Nico Collins is a very good wide receiver. Just look at the numbers right now. 15.4 fantasy points per game, almost 95 reception yards per game, and that's on 7.2 targets per game. So it's not like he's a target monster right now, right? But what is important to note in this matchup specifically is that Tank Dell is likely going to miss this game because he's in the concussion protocol. So I think Nico Collins is actually set up for a really, really good week in fantasy this week, because I think that they're going to do a good job of stopping the run of the Houston Texans, and it's going to force CJ Stroud to throw. I like Nico Collins a lot this week. I'm pretty confident having him here inside my top 10. At number 10, gotta move him up. Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings this week, taking on the Chicago Bears in Chicago this week. Listen, there's an obvious reason he's on here, right? Justin Jefferson, if you haven't heard the news, he injured his hamstring in the loss against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 5. Early reports are this week, I'm filming this at 1 a.m. on Monday. Last report I saw is that Justin Jefferson is unlikely to go in this next week. And by the way, could miss a lot of time. I mean, this is a hamstring injury that didn't look good when you first watched the film. So Jordan Addison has to be inside the top 10 to me. Not only is the offensive passing volume excellent, like Kirk Cousins is throwing 40 times a game. It's unreal. But this matchup is also great. Even though the Washington Commanders just got crushed, Minnesota's passing game is so much better than Washington's. And Jordan Addison is a very good wide receiver. So that 5.8 target share right there, the 5.8 targets per game, That number's going up this week. I would not be surprised if he gets 12 targets, possibly 15 targets. Honestly, I would not be surprised. Jordan Addison's a big play threat. This guy's a great route runner. I think he's going to be used very heavily this week against the Chicago Bears. At number 11 here, I've got Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts this week in Jacksonville. So Jacksonville obviously came out and was really good against the Buffalo Bills in London in that Sunday morning game. Like, they're a very good London team. That's like basically their second home base. And Calvin Ridley finally bounced back. He had a great game on this past Sunday. Now he's back up to 11.5 fantasy points per game, 7.2 targets per game. So Calvin Ridley had the bounce back game. Am I worried about Calvin Ridley this week? Yeah, for sure, because I just don't know how consistent he's going to be. But the reason that he's here is because of the upside. The upside he showed in week 1, he just showed it again in week 5. So the upside didn't go away. The upside is there. The problem is the consistency is not there. So whether he goes back to being a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football again, that remains to be seen. I'll take a shot though on Calvin Ridley because the upside is really high. At number 12, I've got the Miami Dolphins' Jaylen Waddle taking on the Carolina Panthers this week. Jaylen Waddle finally scored. He finally got in the end zone this past week, and it was a great day because he originally got in the end zone the week before against Buffalo. That call didn't count because there was a referee that called back for a holding on the Miami Dolphins. Jaylen Waddle gets in the end zone. Still not a great fantasy week, though. So there's a lot of concern with Jaylen Waddle, and I get it. But he did have more targets this past week. He is looking better. This offense is starting to click. And I do think that Jaylen Waddle is going to get better. And I think that this is a great matchup for him because they're taking on the Carolina Panthers. Again, very similar to Calvin Ridley. The dude's ceiling is so high. And that's why he's in the top 12 still. Not only is the player's ceiling high, but the offensive upside is massive. It's massive. You can't overstate this one. DJ Moore at number 13. This one's crazy. Taking on the Minnesota Vikings this week. Let me tell you this. I never would have thought at some point this season that DJ Moore would be inside my top 15. But I'm sitting here telling you guys DJ Moore is a must start right now. I mean, not only is he a must start this week, but this dude is averaging 19.3 fantasy points per game. Now, largely affected because the dude went off against everybody in fantasy football that played against him. Unbelievable performance against Washington. It was just unbelievably great. But when you look at the numbers, they are concerning. Like 106 reception yards per game, excellent number. 5 touchdowns total, excellent number. 19.3 fantasy points per game, excellent number. 6.8 targets per game is literally almost identical to Jaylen Waddle's though. And I'll tell you this, Justin Fields is not going to remain that efficient. It's just not going to happen. Now, this week against Minnesota, I think he will, because this is a bad defense and a bad secondary. So I think that Justin Fields and DJ Moore can run it back again this week, not to the tune of 40 plus points, but I do think DJ Moore can get in the end zone again and give you a 15 to 20 point game. I don't think that's a really hard accomplishment to do against this kind of defense. Number 14, Deebo Samuel here of the San Francisco 49ers. And the San Francisco 49ers are taking on the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland this week. And then a Brandon Ayuk is right behind him. So don't make too much of the ranking difference here. The reason that I prefer Deebo Samuel right now in fantasy football is because he gets carries on top of targets. So last week against the Dallas Cowboys, he had 30 rushing yards on 5 carries. This guy is used as a running back as well. So whatever targets he gets, he's getting more work on top of that, and Brandon Ayuk doesn't do that. Do I think Brandon Ayuk is the better receiver? Yes, I do. But in fantasy football, Deebo Samuel has more touches and more opportunities to do really, really well. So Deebo Samuel, 12.1 points per game. That's affected by a goose egg that he had just last week. So I wouldn't overthink it too much here. They're both playable. They're both must-start guys. I mean, Brandon Ayuk is just as must-start worthy. 15.1 fantasy points per game, averaging more targets per game and more yards per game than Deebo Samuel is. So Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, both great options. Don't make too much of the ranking here. The reason why I have Deebo above him, like I said, is because he sees more carries. Number 16, gotta drop him right now. CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Los Angeles Chargers in Los Angeles on Monday night. I have to drop him. I mean, not only has CeeDee Lamb been kind of on the same trajectory as Jaylen Waddle as far as disappointment goes for fantasy managers, but CeeDee Lamb is also dealing with a bad quarterback. Like, Dak Prescott is not good. And I don't know if it's just a rut. I don't know what you want to call it, but let's call this one reality. Dak Prescott's not very good. He's just not. He's not finding CeeDee Lamb. He's not giving him opportunities. Like, it's not looking good here. So CeeDee Lamb, as a result, has suffered. 11.5 fantasy points per game, 71 yards per game. Not bad numbers. Just not what we expect from a guy that a lot of us consider elite. And I think most of us would agree with that. And if Dallas Cowboys had a different quarterback, I think it'd be a different situation. That's not his reality, though. They're taking on the Chargers this week. Good matchup. Let's see if CeeDee Lamb can finally break out this week. Number 17, completely contingent, Amon-Ra St. Brown, taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay this week. Like I said, completely contingent on if he plays. Obviously, we've got no idea. Amon-Ra St. Brown missed the game on Sunday along with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I've got no update as far as right now on if Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to play or not. If he does play, you play him. 8.75 targets per game, 14.1 fantasy points per game. You don't sit Amon-Ra if he's healthy and if he's playing. But if he doesn't play, there'll be another receiver who really shoots up the rankings, and we'll discuss him here in just a couple of rankings. Number 18, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that same matchup against Detroit. So listen, Mike Evans also contingent. He missed a lot of the last game they played against New Orleans with a hamstring injury. So let's see if Mike Evans goes or not. If he does go, you play him. The dude's been a stud this year. 15.4 fantasy points per game on only 5 receptions and 84 yards per game. So Mike Evans is a no-brainer if he plays. You continue to suit up Mike Evans on your fantasy roster. Number 19, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals this week in Cincinnati. Honestly, guys, the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers are the hardest group for me to rank. Consistently the hardest. They're just so hot and cold. DK Metcalf gets 3 targets one week, then he gets 5, then he gets 8. DK Metcalf's workload is so inconsistent, much like Tyler Lockett's too, and we'll discuss him here in a minute as well. But DK Metcalf is just so inconsistent, I can never have him higher than like top 12. And he belongs here at number 19 because Cincinnati's defense did look a little bit better last week, and I do think that DK Metcalf is just too inconsistent of a workload because they've got other weapons here, but he always does have the big playability, so you definitely continue to play DK Metcalf. Number 20, also depressing, I got to drop him a little further this time. Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. They're taking on the Houston Texans in Houston this week. This one's depressing, honestly. Chris Olave, I want to have him higher than this. And honestly, if things were different, he would be higher. Not only is his quarterback compromised by an injury, Derek Carr's not healthy. He's clearly not healthy. But reports are that he's dealing with an injury himself. Now, I couldn't verify the reports for some reason. I've seen a lot of chatter about it, but I have seen word that Chris Olave is a little bit injured right now. So if he comes in injured and his quarterback comes in injured, this is not a great situation. He finally got his first touchdown last week, but if he didn't get that touchdown, it would have been a complete bust of a week. I mean, he's averaging 10.1 fantasy points per game. His target share has dropped. It's not looking great right now for Chris Olave. Although, such a talent. If he's healthy, if he plays, he still belongs inside the top 20. But I'm getting worried about Chris Olave at the moment. Devonta Smith, number 21 right now, taking on the New York Jets in New York. As I alluded to earlier when I was talking about A.J. Brown, I think there's a chance that this could be a Devonta Smith type of game. I really do. Because A.J. Brown has dominated over the past several weeks. Teams are forgetting about Devonta Smith. And the Philadelphia Eagles have so many weapons that everyone's going to eat at some point. Devonta Smith had the first 2 games, he ate. Last 3, he's been pretty patient. I think this could be a Devonta Smith type of week, especially when I expect Sauce Gardner to really blanket a lot of A.J. Brown this week. So I think he has another good game. I think his targets go up. I think that he has a good game. I'm confident in Devonta Smith, just not at the point where I'm going to rank him over a guy like DK Metcalf, who's a really big play threat, or Mike Evans, who's also a really big play threat. Devonta Smith, proceed with caution relatively, but this guy, you don't sit him either way. Number 22, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers, taking on the Miami Dolphins. This one probably feels low to some people, honestly. I don't know how it couldn't. 15.8 fantasy points per game, 9.2 targets per game, 7.6 receptions per game. Like, this guy, 3 touchdowns. Like, this guy's been really good at fantasy football. The problem is that if there's a week where he doesn't get in the end zone and he only gets like 5 catches, he's going to get like 50 yards. So his ceiling is very, very good, but his floor is not very high because the offense sucks. But the good thing is that he gets a lot of garbage time points. I think he'll be good again as they get crushed by the Miami Dolphins this weekend. 23, Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks in that Cincinnati matchup. Again, so unpredictable here. The target share is always unpredictable. 6.75 targets per game, 9.6 fantasy points per game. I think that this is the time of the year where I predicted that Jackson Smith-Njigba will start to take over as this primary wide receiver 2. It would not surprise me if it happens this week. I'm still going to have Tyler Lockett inside the top 30, but I will definitely say to Tyler Lockett managers, keep an eye out this week. It could be the start of the Jackson Smith-Njigba era in Seattle. Amari Cooper's down here at 24, and honestly, it felt a little bit low ranking him this low. He's in that matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers, and that's the exact reason he's here. He's here because of the San Francisco 49ers matchup. Now, the last time Amari Cooper played was with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. No Deshaun Watson. And he was not good in that game. But he still was important to the offense. He got 6 targets in that game. But I do think against a San Francisco 49ers team that is absolutely rolling right now, it's going to be tough. And I do think this pass rush will be after Deshaun, and that's going to change a lot of things. But Amari Cooper, still a good option because the volume is going to be there. Number 25, may feel low. Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders. How about Jakobi Meyers, man? Jakobi Meyers is crushing it. He's taking on his former team against the New England Patriots. And as I said earlier, if there's a chance that Bill Belichick can take Davante Adams out of the game, Jakobi Meyers is eating. He works really well with Jimmy Garoppolo. 13.6 fantasy points per game, 8.67 targets per game. And keep in mind, those numbers are with Aiden O'Connell. You take Aiden O'Connell out of the picture, Jakobi Meyers has been an absolute fantasy stud with Jimmy Garoppolo. It might sound low, honestly, but Jakobi Meyers definitely belongs at the very least inside of the top 25 at this point. Number 26, Josh Reynolds of the Detroit Lions has an absolute opportunity to hop up at least 5 to 10 spots. They're taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay this week. I don't love the matchup. That's my biggest problem here with this. Tampa Bay's got a very, very solid defense. So I do not love this matchup by any means, but Detroit's offense is so good. Their offensive line is perfectly protecting Jared Goff right now. Their run game is easily balancing out the pass game. Everything lines up here. And if Amon-Ra St. Brown is not on the field, like I said, Josh Reynolds is going to shoot up this board probably inside of the top 18. At the very least, I think that he goes there. We'll have to see what happens with Amon-Ra St. Brown. If Amon-Ra St. Brown is there, Josh Reynolds probably sticks around here, maybe drops a couple of spots. Marquise Brown, Arizona Cardinals, taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Los Angeles this week. Listen, Marquise Brown has been very serviceable this year. And when I say serviceable, he's had several very good games. But for the most part, he's hovering around 4 catches for 60 yards and maybe a touchdown. That's kind of been Marquise Brown's year this year, which is not bad at all. Especially in a full PPR league, this guy's been very, very good in fantasy football. But the problem here is that, as I discussed in one of my videos on Monday that I put out about the waiver wire, I actually think that this Arizona Cardinals team is going to start getting absolutely trounced. You can only put up with losing for so long when you're trying really hard, and I do think that Arizona will become one of those teams this year. I think they'll probably be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes when it's all said and done this year. And I think that Marquise Brown is just going to start to become a descending asset, much like all the other offensive pieces, just because I don't think this team's really going to last that much longer as far as being competitive in NFL goes. Number 28, Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Feels a little bit low. Obviously, Christian Kirk's been very consistent this year. 11 fantasy points per game, 8.6 targets per game. He's averaging more targets per game than Calvin Ridley. He's just not the big play threat Calvin Ridley is. He's not the complete receiver that Calvin Ridley is. They are taking on Indianapolis this week, which is not the best matchup, but I do think that Christian Kirk really is just a very steady, high-end upside wide receiver 3 flex option. Christian Kirk's going to continue to be in the top 30. His ranking is going to probably vary week to week, though. Number 29, DeAndre Hopkins of the Tennessee Titans. Probably feels low this week, especially coming off the week that he just had. They're taking on the Baltimore Ravens, and I think that when you look at what he did last week, over 140 yards receiving on 8 catches, he was excellent. I mean, he was no doubt excellent player. He's averaging 9.7 fantasy points per game, though. What does that tell you? It tells you that he's had a lot of bust games, and he definitely has. So that's my problem with DeAndre Hopkins. His floor is not safe. He is not a safe floor. He's got a high ceiling still, but this floor is just not that safe. This Tennessee offense, they're just not that good. And I think that a Baltimore Ravens team that just got, honestly, humiliated by the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to be mad and they're going to be ready to play hard. Rounding out the top 30 in the same matchup, Zay Flowers here taking on the Tennessee Titans. Zay Flowers is honestly a little bit disappointing right now. Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, they're not even close to being the wide receiver 1. It's Zay Flowers. 8 targets per game, just hasn't found the end zone yet. I think one of these weeks he will. Tennessee's a good matchup as well. For obviously fantasy wide receivers, they get thrown on a ton. So I think there is a chance that Zay Flowers has a good game here. But their offense has been pretty disappointing, and so I can't rank Zay Flowers much higher than this right now. And as promised, my underdog flex wide receiver option of the week that was not on this list right here, and I tried to fit him in here, but it's KJ Osborne of the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Chicago Bears this week. So for the obvious reason, Justin Jefferson likely being out, KJ Osborne has to shoot up rankings right now. And the other reason is because the Chicago Bears defense is not very good. This is a defense that is very susceptible to fantasy wide receivers. KJ Osborne came right in and stepped in and started getting targets immediately in this offense. In fact, he had a scoring opportunity and he ran the wrong route. I think they get it ironed out this week. I think it's the perfect type of game for KJ Osborne to have a bounce-back game against a division rival that they have repeatedly owned over the years. I think that KJ Osborne is a very good underdog play at the flex position. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered before week 6 fantasy football. And if you want to see some buy low trade targets before week 6 fantasy football, click on this video right here.